Columnist Doug Todd has completed an investigation on disinformation. Doug, maybe let's start with the basics. Can you give some examples of historical disinformation campaigns?
Yeah, historical disinformation. This propaganda has been around for a while. Like during the Second World War, Hitler pretty well started the war by saying, oh, Poland's invading Germany. And they rounded up some people from their concentration camps and put them in German uniforms and shot them and said, oh, look, the Poles did this. So that's pretty savage. But now disinformation is just as dangerous, but almost completely different. It's all online, most of it, and it's in our face every day to the average person. It doesn't come filtered through the media. It comes right on our screens.
So how are the stakes different then?
It's so immediate, and it's so confusing what's now happening through disinformation. Like during the American election, looks like Russia put out a story that Pope Francis had endorsed Donald Trump for president. And they ended up putting it on something that looked like a real American TV station. And I remember hearing about that story thinking, that's unusual, because the Pope certainly didn't endorse Trump. But it was quite sophisticated, and it's there to sow confusion.
Mm-hmm. Why is disinformation then such an appealing weapon? Because people might be able to see through that confusion.
Yeah, well, David Frum, who's coming to Vancouver to speak about this, said that he thinks it was basically the tipping point in getting Trump elected. And he thinks it also was the same with the Brexit vote, that if it wasn't for disinformation, mostly coming in from Russia, that the vote to leave EU would not have happened. He says that's pretty big wins, as he says, for disinformation. The thing about disinformation is it's quite cheap to do, and Russia is kind of pretty well a middling power. It's not doing that well as an economy or anything like that, but they can sow disinformation around the world and kind of enjoy it.
Is Canada vulnerable to disinformation campaigns?
We haven't been as targeted as much as Britain or the US or the Ukraine. I write about Ukraine a little bit. But Frum and others think that we are vulnerable, yeah. And his example is through ethnic language media, which is pretty powerful in, Metro Vancouver and Toronto. And he particularly points to Chinese language media. He says Chinese Communist government can plant stories in there and does plant stories in there. And now that we've got this dispute going with China over the rest of the Huawei executive, there have been some stories planted, including that Li Ka-shing is so mad at Canada that he's pulling out of his bid to buy Husky oil, which is not true. But it's out there in the Chinese language media. So he's from saying we should monitor that more closely, because there's an issue of neighbors don't know what their neighbors are saying in Canada, right? Because most of us can't read different languages.
So what can we do to protect ourselves from disinformation?
Yeah, well, the federal government has just came out this month actually, saying they're going to start a new program to monitor disinformation. It's been met with sort of a welcome, but also some skepticism by the opposition party, saying, okay, who's going to decide what disinformation is? But David Frum talks about recognizing that videos that go viral are not necessarily reality, which I think is extremely good advice, that even journalists get hooked by these viral videos that don't tell the whole story and are pretty dangerous. And he also says he just encourages partly people to start reading books again rather than get off the screen. Mm-hmm. Books, he trusts books more than, and print
sure.
more than video.
Okay, Doug, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.